Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's a live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
Good evening. Tonight on Lead Story, a question of accountability and how our politics responds when state systems fail. The Auditor General's performance audit of the University Hospital of the West Indies has exposed serious procurement and governance weaknesses at one of Jamaica's most important public health institutions. But as often happens in this country, an institutional failure has quickly become a political battle. Opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes, has issued a response following public claims made in the wake of the audit. And the Jamaica Labour Party's youth arm, Young Jamaica, has since pushed back, escalating the political exchange. Tonight we step back from the allegation and counter-allegation to ask a bigger question. What does responsible political conduct look like when audits expose governance failure? And how do we ensure the public interest is not lost in partisan noise? We'll also examine what these failures mean for healthcare delivery and public finances. And later, we turn to police accountability as body-worn cameras arrive in Jamaica amid ongoing concerns about use of force and oversight. This is Lead Story. Good evening. As we continue our coverage of the fallout from the Auditor General's performance audit of the University Hospital of the West Indies, an audit that identified serious procurement and governance failures at the institution. Over the past several days, that institutional finding has spilled into the political arena. Opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes, has responded to claims raised in the public domain coming from that report. And then there was a tussle with the Jamaica Labour Party's youth arm, Young Jamaica, since issuing a statement pushing back against his response. This segment is not about determining guilt or innocence. It's about how political actors respond when audits expose governance failures and what that response tells us about accountability culture in Jamaica. Joining me now is Dr. Orville Taylor, columnist and educator. Before we go to Dr. Taylor, let's remind you of what the UHWI report coming from the Auditor General, concerned about value for money, discussed, because this was a wide-ranging and sweeping report. The overview of the report shows that we have $671 billion spent on public health from 2019 to 20 and 2024 to 2025, and now 54% going to salaries. Well, all of that to say that we have a lot of money that Jamaicans would want to make sure is going to the right place. But against this backdrop, the Auditor General examined procurement practices at the UHWI, looking for value for money. And the audit found serious and systemic weaknesses in governance, procurement planning, contract management as well. They found non-compliance with procurement laws and procurement guidelines. $65 billion in subventions not fully accounted for, 51 contracts worth $512 million not having documentation, and poor compliance with the Government of Jamaica Electronic Procurement or JOJEP system, with only 20 of more than 800 procurement activities properly published. $23 million also lost through the misuse of the University of the West Indies, or rather the University Hospital of the West Indies' tax-exempt status, and $69.2 million were procured after the delivery or completion of the things already were there. So we now have with us Dr. Orville Taylor, economist and educator, who will be teasing this out with us, because we as a nation have been watching this, and we certainly would benefit from having the sort of feedback that Dr. Taylor can bring. Dr. Orville Taylor, thanks so much for joining us inside Lead Story. Hi, Dr. Taylor, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well. Better now for having you on with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I like it when people flatter me. Yeah.
Dr. Taylor, we're watching now a back and forth that's happening in the political arena as a result of the report released by the Auditor General. It's now up on the Auditor General's website that persons can go and see. And there's also an executive summary if you don't want to read all 72 pages of the report. What was your first reaction to now the findings of this report?
Well, first of all, I was relieved. I was relieved because it shows that our systems here are working in this country, and kudos to the hard-working public servants in the Auditors General Department. Full stop. In the same way, you know, like when the inspector was arrested or the JDF soldier was arrested as a consequence of the investigations, kudos. So it's human nature, you know, as long as you don't have the kind of controls and the checks and balances in place, people are going to vary. And it's a wake-up call. I'm actually very surprised by the magnitude of the breaches and the amount of money that is lost. Money which belongs rightfully to the Jamaican people, not the West Indian community, the Jamaican people. And it says some other things about governance that we need to just fix here and now. So I'm waiting for all of the investigations to be completed and the chips to fall. And the people can, you know, do their posturing as much as they can posture. Fine, I don't care too much about that. I just want to know that at the end of the day, the right decisions are made, and whoever is to be held accountable and whoever is to be punished is punished. And those gaps which we have discovered are going to be stopped.
Dr. Taylor, watching this now, you have said you are concerned about accountability, but we've watched this move now, not just from an institutional failure to also a political exchange. From your perspective, what phase of this controversy are we in, given that politics has now reared its head?
You know, I'm not even interested in the politics, to tell you the truth, because truth doesn't vary according to which mouth or which color it is coming from, you know. Right? You know, I did 18 years as a public servant in central government before joining the academy. I mean, there are some things in that area that have really, really surprised me. And so I am exactly where I have been for most of my career. That is, the right thing must be done. I really don't care too much. Politics chefs are always going to do politics. But this is not about politics, this is about governance. And yes, it is a particular party that is in power now, and the opposition is going to make a lot of mileage out of it. And why wouldn't you? If you are on the edge, on the boundaries, and someone is hitting a six carelessly, catch it if you can. Move with it. You know, I have zero problem with the politicians in the opposition making as much out of it as possible, except though, this is the University Hospital of the West Indies. And like the University of the West Indies, I think we as a Jamaican people, as a government, the government, our government, need to figure out once and for all just how much control we are going to be having or exercising over our own institutions, over our own money. I believe that in the same way that we are raising questions with the Ministry of Health and Sarah, etc., over these issues which are of internal governance, I want to say anywhere, any institution, including the university itself, yes, I'm saying that, good. Vex who want to vex. Because I am part of it too, and I want to be, you want to start it with yourself. You want to know that you are part of a system and you're willing to open yourself up to. I believe, honestly, that between the university, and this perhaps needs to occur on every single campus where the local government, right, is paying the majority of the certain operating costs, etc.
Well, in that context, Dr. Taylor, then,
yes,
because that's a long-standing conversation and one that the governments have been pushing back on, the increases that University of the West Indies comes to them as Board of Governors every single year asking for increases, the taxpayers of countries saying they can't bear anymore. This particular issue about the University Hospital of the West Indies is also a healthcare issue, and we have opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes, who responded to the findings of that Auditor General report. Let's take a quick listen.
All right.
The Auditor General has now confirmed what I have been warning about for over a year. No procurement documents were found for $521 million in contracts awarded by the University Hospital of the West Indies. That is not a clerical error. This is a serious failure of governance. For more than a year, I raised concerns about procurement practices across the Ministry of Health and its agencies. Each time, the minister assured the country that systems were sound and functioning properly. The Auditor General has now shown that this was simply not true. Despite repeated public assurances from Health Minister Christopher Tufton, hundreds of millions of dollars were committed without basic documentation. We saw this after the Integrity Commission exposed the improper $80 million in contracts awarded to Market Me. We saw it again when a $31 million drill for Bustamante Hospital was publicly praised as a model procurement. Yet once more, serious breaches occurred under the minister's watch. This government.
So that is a part of the response shared with the nation by opposition spokesman of health, Dr. Alfred Dawes.
Yeah, it's a healthcare question, but more fundamentally, it's a governance question. It's an accountability question, right? Because you can have accountability, you can have lack of accountability and still somehow manage to have good healthcare. So I do know that there is a cybernetic link between the two, but this is clearly an issue of governance.
But on this particular point...
Just a second. And the health minister, right? The health minister does have a case to answer.
Well, hold on, Dr. Orville Taylor, the youth arm of the Jamaica Labour Party, Young Jamaica, came out and said that they view as barefaced and disingenuous in a statement released yesterday, the statement from opposition spokesman Alfred Dawes, where he sought to blame ministerial oversight, they said, for clear operational breaches at the University Hospital of the West Indies. They instead went and threw it back at Dr. Dawes, asking him 3 questions: whether a company owned by a PNP parliamentarian is among the beneficiaries of what the Auditor General has described as inappropriate use of the money there at the UHWI through the tax exemption; if he, Dr. Dawes, had at any time been a founding member or partner of a company owned by a PNP colleague parliamentarian, which the Auditor General indicated, and if he, Dr. Dawes, at any time had any professional or personal association with the referenced entity. That is then the more complete discussion for us to have.
Yes, isn't this a beautiful democracy though, right? That we can raise up every single thing. And of course, when you throw stones, make sure that you're not in a glass house. But the fact that he may or may not have benefited? And I don't know. Those are questions that he himself has to answer. And the more the monkey climbs, the more he's exposed to. So having exposed himself and asked the questions, he has to answer those. But it does not, however, make light of the fact that Minister Tufton has to answer.
Well, we certainly do have to answer those questions. We have to take a break. Orville Taylor, we'll take a quick break here with you inside Lead Story and come back. Continuing this discussion now, clarifying as well that those are assertions being made by Young Jamaica, and at no point in time do we hear any of us here at CVM TV take responsibility for the claims that have been made by Young Jamaica. But this is a more complete conversation that we'll have after the break here inside Lead Story.
Montego Bay, we've been tested, but we are still standing. After Hurricane Melissa, our community is rising stronger than ever. The Kiwanis Club of Providence, Montego Bay Breast Cancer Awareness Run, Walk and Wheelchair has a new date, Sunday, January 18, 2026 at Fairview Office Park. Registration is now reopened and all previous registrations remain valid. Baby pickup is upstairs at Fresh Supermarket, Harbor City Mall, Thursday to Saturday, 2 to 6 p.m. Then join us on Sunday, January 18th. Together, we rise as we support the fighters, admire the survivors, and honor the taken. Visit KiwanisProvidenceMBJ.com.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The Time by the Office of the Prime
We're speaking this evening with columnist and educator Dr. Orville Taylor as we look at what has been brewing in the nation, a national conversation ongoing and now taking a new turn as there has now been political accountability being requested thanks to the Auditor General's report on the University Hospital of the West Indies and a request for the nation at the end of all the damning findings to have value for money. Dr. Taylor, before the break, we had spoken about not only the release from Dr. Alfred Dawes, but also the reaction from Young Jamaica. When you're watching both of these, what is it that stands out to you? The back and forth or the strategy and politics of what both sides are doing?
Well, first of all, Dr. Dawes is doing his job as opposition spokesperson on health. And he has a responsibility to raise every question on behalf of the opposition, but also on behalf of the Jamaican people. He's an elected member of parliament and all those other things too. That's his job to do that. In his personal space, he has a responsibility also to make sure that whenever he's throwing stones, that he is able to answer any kinds of question. And politicians will do politics, notwithstanding the possibility that there may be some substance to the questions which have been asked by Young Jamaica, why wouldn't they ask those questions? They are doing the politics, right? That's what they are there for. They are rabble-rousers too. They are demagogues. Let them do what they have to do, right? And Dr. Dawes can answer those questions later on, and fine. However, Chris Tufton has to answer the questions which are asked, and I'll tell you why.
And that's Dr. Christopher Tufton as Minister of Health and Wellness.
Again?
And that's Dr. Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness.
Of course. Yes, of course. And he has to answer those questions and answer the questions to the satisfaction of the Jamaican people. Notwithstanding the fact that the UHWI, like the University of the West Indies, is not completely under the control. It's not under the control of the Jamaican government per se. However, the hospital has more oversight. And guess what? Whenever I hear the government making presentations about the positive things about the health sector, it does not exclude the University Hospital of the West Indies. And so therefore, you embrace the sugar, you've got to embrace the salt and the bitter gall. So nobody escapes this one. And you know, if in digging up the dirt, we find dirt of all kinds of color, you know, it's nice when you do the mining. I don't mind if you find jade and rubies in the same place. That's all right. The Jamaican people need answers.
The Jamaican people do need answers, and we'll continue to then deep dive into what's going on. Dr. Taylor, however, Jamaicans are watching this and they're seeing what the money could have done. They're looking at things that healthcare could have benefited from, what this money could have been used to do. It's something yesterday that we spoke with Jeanette Calder, the Executive Director of the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal about. We also have that as part of the release from Dr. Alfred Dawes. In all of this, are you hoping that people don't lose sight of the real issue here? That is, Jamaica's healthcare system didn't get the best value for money with the limited resources we have as a nation.
Absolutely. And guess what? The good thing about this country, and you can judge from the turnout in the recent elections, the majority of Jamaicans are neither PNP or JLP sycophants, right? So you have the extremists on both sides. But the majority of us are people who don't have any long-term loyalty to any party. And so, which is why the numbers do indicate that. And so guess what? They can play their politics as much as they want. At the end of the day, the truth is going to come out. And when the truth is out and all of the answers are provided, then who is to be punished is going to be punished. That's one side. I'm hoping, though, that going forward, we are going to close up some of the gates. Yes, some of the horses would have already gone, but there are some foals and fillies that are still inside there that can be trained. So let's see.
Let us see, but there's also a question here as well about how we deal with these sorts of findings, Dr. Taylor, that it moves so quickly into the political arena and that it continues to be this back and forth ball between the two major political parties, even though you've made it very clear most people don't have any long-term alliance or connection with either of them. Does that then move people out of paying attention to the details of a report like this done by the Auditor General and her team, or does it move it into the political arena for point scoring and perhaps a song at the next general election?
It is both, because the politicians are going to do their politics, and you know, the government politicians are going to be trying to diminish responsibility and make it look like a less of a crisis, and the opposition, of course, is going to use hyperboles and do as much. However, you want to get the confidence of the Jamaican people, you know, what you need to see is people who are brought to book. Today, I was having a conversation with Hugh Faulkner from Indicom, and he was pointing out to me that in spite of the fact that we are seeing an increase in the number of incidents involving the police and allegations of abuse and fatal
shootings, yes,
that we also saw an increase in action taken against officers who are charged. So that's how you get confidence in an institution. That is how you build a nation. Not just when you discover the misconduct, but when you see an increasing trend in facing down the misconduct, facing down what looks like corruption. You know, we like to talk about the Singapore model and how we went off and where we went off. What Lee Kuan Yew did in the first part of his regime was to be zero tolerant as regards corruption. He sent people who are closely related to him to prison. When we are that committed, then we will have a better nation. And you know, Singapore has what, about 50% of its population owning houses. And when you look at all of the health indicators, wonderful. We can go that direction. And we are, if we are serious, but we must make a determination, whether opposition or government, that we are going to belt the cat.
We must make a decision. It's very clear then from what you're putting on the table that Jamaica has options, especially when you said, all right, not a problem to find something out about the accountability mechanisms we put in place afterwards are the things that will make the difference. But you've made it very clear that the government, through the Health Minister, Dr. Christopher Tufton, has questions to answer. Does Dr. Alfred Dawes, with the concerns that have been raised by Young Jamaica, also have questions to answer? Because some of these are so serious that there are...
To answer the question.
He's not yet responded publicly that we have seen, and therefore we're not able to carry that. But there are some options. Public explanation, a recusal from shadow minister responsibilities, a referral to investigative authorities. What is it you'd like to see?
Well, I don't know what kind of substance comes from it, because these Young Jamaica doesn't know storm, and so they can speak and say whatever they want to say. They don't have any, they're not elected, and so they are doing what their job is. Now, I'm hoping that everything that they say, they can substantiate it, but in fact, they're actually raising questions. But you raise questions to someone who is part of your government, because opposition is part of the government, then those questions which have landed in the laps of the Jamaican people must be answered. Now, they could easily be dismissed and rubbished by Dr. Dawes, right? But he can't ignore them.
Can't ignore them. And I like how you said that, because it makes it very clear. Both major political parties, in the person of Dr. Christopher Tufton and in the person of Dr. Alfred Dawes, as both health minister and opposition spokesman on health, have questions to answer. But what questions do you see for the regional health authorities, as well as for the University Hospital of the West Indies itself? Because some of these procurement breaches were very much decisions that had been made, the Auditor General said, by the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO of the University Hospital of the West Indies, and the regional health authorities are the ones we're expecting to be looking into hospitals, especially those that have this quasi-private nature, like the UHWI does, to look in and to keep a close eye on them. How do you hold them accountable?
In the same way where we did not disarticulate that doctor who's put himself up for election and was thus, what did they do to him? They interdicted him, and so he's on interdiction, etc. That one, because what you're saying is it doesn't really matter what kind of independence or semi-independence that you think that you have. You are part of the system, and therefore you must answer. So, the CEO has to be brought to book, but guess what? The CEO is supposed to report to someone. And whoever dropped the ball, at different levels, because there are times when you have these probes. We saw Petrojam where a number of heads fell. I remember I was a public servant in the 1980s, the end of the 1980s, the beginning of the 1990s, in the Labour Ministry, when the elected official, was brought the ministry and the entire farm work program into disrepute, and then the permanent secretary was also dragged in. So in fact, you had the chief executive officer and the elected official, both of whom were convicted. And guess what came out of that? We saw a better organized. There are still some problems with the overseas employment program coming from out of the Ministry of Labour, but there are far more checks and balances in place now. And it was a good thing, because something happened, some improvement in the system came as a result of that crisis. Because it wasn't just about crisis, that you cry like sis. You really went through the crisis, and people were made to pay for their travesties. So this is, I think, it's a teaching moment, but it's a moment for us to act. So when the dust settles after all of the politics, and they're going to do the politics, Jamaican people must be answered. And I like the fact that the Auditor General, in as much as people have tried to push the department, etc., right, the Auditor General reports to Parliament. I like it. At a time also when the majority in Parliament is pencil thin, I love it.
This is the kind of accountability framework then that allows the Jamaican people to flourish and benefit. Dr. Orville Taylor, columnist and educator, you've been generous with your time this evening with us. Thank you for joining us inside.
And bless you. Thank you for bringing me on. And by the way, Thumbs up, you're doing well.
Thank you so very much. Thanks for joining us as well inside Lead Story. Now, we are going to be continuing this discussion after the break because accountability doesn't just stop at looking at the political back and forth. There's also a whole pen and paper work that the Auditor General's Department did. We'll take a look at that next here inside Lead Story.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Everybody want to save a country right now.
One thing about Jamaicans, we might have differences, but we know when something is good for all of us. And when we work together against crime and violence, we are stronger than ever. And that's how we know the Citizen Security Plan can work.
That one that name CSP.
The Citizen Security Plan is an initiative of the Ministry of National Security in partnership with the European Union. It's an all-of-government effort to create safer streets and build stronger communities. Go to mns.gov.jm to learn how you can play your part.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out, don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is 6:30.
This is Lead Story, and we are discussing the biggest story in the country right now, the Auditor General's report concerning the University Hospital of the West Indies. But we're now turning from political claims to institutional consequences. That Auditor General's report makes it clear that procurement failures at the University Hospital of the West Indies were not technical nor isolated. They were systemic. What does that mean for patient care, for public funds, and for governance at one of Jamaica's most important teaching hospitals? Well, CVM sat down with the board chair of the University Hospital of the West Indies, Patrick Hilton, to discuss what it is that led to where we are and the way forward. So let's first listen in with him.
So when one looks at the facts over the period of time, and I'm referencing here the period under review, which is 2019 to 2025, right? What we see is an institution which had developed, to a large extent, some methodologies for carrying out procurement activities, many of which, well, on the face of it, and certainly by virtue of the findings, did not accord with what the standard operating procedures are for public sector entities, right? And, you know, this, if you look at the period which was reviewed, you'll see that many of these practices would have been what we describe as legacy practices because they pre-existed, they existed during that time. Even though changes were made and the report makes reference to it, to the fact that, you know, things were moved to an e-platform, it wasn't really embraced by the organization. The organization continued some of the old ways of doing things. And so it's clear that the whole process of change management, which was required to be effective in transforming the way in which, you know, procurement was done, did not take place efficiently, right? And, you know, that would account for some of the findings. I wouldn't say it would account for everything,
okay,
but would account for some of the findings. So
Well, that was the board chair of the University Hospital of the West Indies, Patrick Hilton, speaking with us here at CVM, helping us understand how exactly the hospital got to this point. But we also had this conversation as well with Jeanette Calder, because what you heard Patrick Hilton talk about there, the e-system, is the Government of Jamaica electronic procurement system. And the failures of using that led to only 20 of 800 contracts being fully put into the system. Another issue, though, was that documentation at the University Hospital of the West Indies did not account for 51 contracts valued at $521 million. So we asked Jeanette Calder, what should that mean to the country as we watch this? Let's take a listen.
Well, why do we need a documentation? So that our Auditor General, which is really the people's, can go and look and make sure that there was no nepotism, there was no favoritism, that we got value for money. And when you have no documentation, you don't know nothing. You don't even know who got the contracts, right? The other thing that's interesting about that is of the 51 contracts, all 50 were approved by the CEO of UE. Now, let me hasten to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that he broke the law. Apparently, anything that's 30 million and below, he can approve without needing what we would call the Public Procurement Commission and Ministry of Finance. But the point is, if we are relying on you as the CEO, and surely it doesn't mean, though you can approve it, that you simply give up what we call all due process and all due diligence, which is literally what you did. I mean, think about it, Jody. You don't have a public procurement guide. If you need a painter for your kitchen, if you need somebody to fix your roof, what are you going to do? Now call some friends and shop around. You're not just going to call anybody, the first person, and you say, come do it for me. You and I have our own processes and our own due diligence that we go through with our money to ensure that we're getting what? Value for money. So we are saying, even without the rules applying to the CEO, and he had the authority to approve those 50 out of the 51 contracts, we are still expecting him, man, to do what? Common sense. Compete. Call around 3 people and keep your documentation so that you can do what? So that you can protect yourself from accusation. Yeah? Because now he's being accused and he can barely what? He can barely what? Defend himself in the absence of documentation.
That's the importance of documentation. The core issue here, though, is opportunity lost and opportunity cost. Money lost to poor controls is money not available for medicine, staffing, or infrastructure. But accountability does just not end with identifying weaknesses. It also requires follow-through. And Patrick Hilton said in a statement and in speaking with us that we also are now seeing board-implemented reforms coming from what has been shared in the Auditor General's report. Patrick Hilton, though, explains.
19 to 2000. The new board would have been constituted post the election, right? Of course, there was a board before the election, and then post the election, there's a new board constituted, which would have been, I think it would have been like late September. And the first meeting would have been in October. And the board at that stage would have had sight of the draft Auditor General's report. Would not have been finalized then. But it would have given some insight into some of the issues. So what we did was to institute, some procedures for further review, further investigation, because even as much as we get a report from the Auditor General, the institution has a responsibility to verify and to establish for itself, especially if it is going to act on it, the findings and the extent to which, there are weaknesses and so on in the institutional framework for the hospital. So we did that, and we identified a number of things, right, and decided to take action, as you said, to help to restore accountability, to restore, the integrity and compliance within the institution.
Okay.
So one of the first things we did, we started the process of initiating accountability proceedings, right, and that is with respect to individuals who would be identified as negligent or non-compliant. And this, of course, would be in order with whether it's staff orders for the public sector regulations, the Public Procurement Act, and of course, in initiating those, we have to have regard to the principles of natural justice, principles of due process, right? Because each individual has a right to be heard and to defend themselves.
So, Mr.
That
Hilton,
was one action. Another action was the strengthening of the oversight mechanisms, right, across procurement, across finance, in terms of, how the senior management functions ensured adherence to statutory and, the required procedures. We have started the process of implementing training, clarified some delegation of authority, and instituted some level of performance monitoring for staff involved in procurement and financial management.
Okay.
And we have also started some work on improving the culture of accountability, the culture of transparency, the culture of compliance, right? And more regular reporting to the board and enhanced internal audit follow-up on some of these issues.
So you hear there Patrick Hilton, board chair of the University Hospital of the West Indies, speaking there with our reporter Amoy Harriet. Now, in that exclusive interview, he spoke to us about the upgrades, the things that are being done, and indicating as well that this is a new board that had been put in place after the September elections here in Jamaica. So brand new board, getting the Auditor General's report and now putting things in place. But this is your money. And so we put the question to Jeanette Calder, Executive Director of the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal. What is the thing that would now have us move from this just being an administrative error to now something that could potentially draw criminal liability? Because there's a lot of money that we're now discussing. Let's take a listen to her response.
Well, we have already discussed it, and I mean, it's. I should use the word allegedly, but I have to be honest with you. You don't accidentally start writing contracts and procuring after you have gotten. That to me is something that's going to be pretty easy to litigate. I would imagine it will get to the courts of law. And what we're saying about what is happening with customs, that's falsification of documents. There is a revenue protection division in the Ministry of Finance. I don't know how many Jamaicans are aware, but the revenue protection division, as the name suggests, is there to protect revenue. They have quite a bit of impressive sanctions at their disposal. And it was actually created specifically, Jody, for customs. So revenue protection at the border. So I'm not only hoping to hear from the fraud squad, I'm hoping to hear from this special division in the Ministry of Finance. And the people of Jamaica are going to have to find out what kind of administrative sanctions, note I said administrative, and criminal sanctions. And why did I say administrative? Because it takes a while to get to criminal. And sometimes we sit there with the same people sitting in the offices right now, who I've lost quite a bit of confidence and trust in, but we have administrative sanctions that the financial secretary in the Ministry of Finance can apply. The financial secretary is not a normal permanent secretary. It's a very powerful public official. And one of the things that the financial secretary can do right now today with the power that is vested in her by the law is to recover the losses of that 23 million. She knows who those public officials are, not because the Auditor General don't name them. The documentation is there. So the FS can even begin from now, Jody, and one of the sanctions is to say, you're going to pay back the people of Jamaica that 23 million. That's just one of several. And so I'm hoping it will be administrative, and then later on we will see the criminal sanctions coming into play.
We're looking at a hospital. Well, we're certainly looking at a situation that the nation is hearing from quite a number of people about. You heard a moment ago, Jeanette Calder from Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal. Before her, our exclusive interview with board chair of the UHWI, Patrick Hilton. But we've had now word from the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, that we will be having a committee established to review processes at the UHWI. However, the public question is whether this results in meaningful reform or whether it becomes another report added to the archive of unimplemented recommendations. To close out this segment, let's listen to Jeanette Calder, who takes us all the way back to a 1998 Douglas Orain Commission report and says we've had committees like these set up before. We've not seen the kind of implementation that we would love to.
There's a committee that has been put in place that will come in and will be reviewing and will be making recommendations. I think it's called an institutional review committee. We've had those committees before. I actually brought with you a similar report that was done by a similar committee. And before I go, I just want to share with you what was part of the executive summary of a committee and a task force that was set up with similar terms of reference as this one. Coming away, this task force said that there's an urgent need for a culture of accountability to be instituted throughout the public service, starting at the top with the political directorate. He said that there is an unwillingness to accept the reality of how much of a crisis exists within the public sector. And he said there's a lack of accountability, not just throughout the public sector, but including the top echelons of the public sector and the political directorate. Much of the waste and inefficiencies occur because there's no culture of economy and or efficiency. The process of change must be led from the top, and there's a whole heap of pages of recommendations. You know, when this committee prepared this, having reviewed a similar matter, it's called the Douglas Orain Report, 1998. So what is Jeanette saying? We're saying that several of these kinds of initiatives have been done over the years when Auditor General produces reports like these, and we're still here today. We're going to have a Jodian and a Jeanette talking in another 23 years. What's going to make the difference? It's citizen engagement. It's citizens deciding that we have employed that long list of people I just mentioned a while ago, and it's our money, we are the beneficiaries, and we're the financiers of everything here that we're discussing. So I am of the view that until the citizens of Jamaica really begin to let their voices be heard, not just their votes, but their voice in between the votes, then we'll be having this conversation again in another 25 or another 41 years. So this is really a call not just to a committee and to a minister. This Auditor General's report is a call to the citizens of Jamaica to say enough is enough.
Call to the citizens of Jamaica to keep this on the agenda and to keep your eyes on what value for money looks like, not only in the healthcare sector, but everywhere your tax dollars are spent. We'll take a break inside Lead Story and come back to you because body-worn cameras and police accountability are up next inside Lead Story.
Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
If you're a woman in business, it's time to go bigger.
Your ambition is calling, and Horizon for Women in Business is answering.
Horizon, a new loan product from Access Financial Services designed for women entrepreneurs to unlock the capital you need to grow and take your business beyond limits with quick approval, flexible repayment, and low interest rates. Your success is on the horizon.
Call us now. The funds are waiting.
Your success is on the horizon.
Now, the discussion of body-worn cameras and police accountability started off the year. We inside Lead Story took a look at the incredible reduction in the number of fatal killings here in Jamaica, but also an increase in fatal police encounters with citizens. Now, from procurement failures and issues that had been identified, especially with civil society groups, we now have body-worn cameras arriving in Jamaica. This is a move long called for by human rights advocates, particularly after the spike we saw in police-involved fatalities at the end of last year. The cameras are intended to support transparency, evidence collection, and oversight by bodies such as Indicom, but technology alone does not guarantee accountability. Joining us now inside Lead Story is the Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, Mikel Jackson. Mikel Jackson, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. My apologies for the background.
No worries, Mikel. We don't have any problems at all making sure that you are able to be here on with us. We fixed everything up for you as you speak to the rest of Jamaica. But this is a follow-up for you because we ended the year and came into 2026 with a discussion about the reduction in police, rather, a reduction in murders here in Jamaica, but the increase in police-involved fatal shootings with citizens. The body-worn cameras were a central issue for Jamaicans for Justice. What's your response and reaction to the news that body-worn cameras have now landed in the island?
We welcome this development, certainly. We have been waiting a while as a country, and we do recognize the efforts of the JCF personnel in getting the body cameras into the island and having the matter sorted out with the procurement. However, while we make this welcome known and extend our congratulations and our appreciation, we also take note of the language in the press release coming from the JCF, where and I don't have the exact wording at hand, please forgive me, but if you look at the language of it, it suggests that the body cameras will be deployed in situations where there is high interaction with citizens based on operational need. There is nothing in that press statement that gives a commitment that a portion of the body cameras will be deployed in planned operations. And I think I have to put two things in perspective for the viewers. The first thing is that when you look at the data from Indicom, it does say that 51% of police fatalities or 51% of the planned operations have been deployed in special operations and so on. The AFAT team, the apprehension special teams that the JCF has. But when you look at the contribution of those teams, for example, towards the fatalities, it's 47%. 51% of all fatal shootings actually stemmed from planned operations. So with that in mind, we're saying, where is the commitment for a portion of those body cameras towards planned operations? The second thing is, I reminded the last time we spoke, Jodianne, that Police Commissioner Dr. Blake was speaking on another radio program, and when the journalist asked, is there a commitment that a portion of these body cameras to be procured at the time will be deployed to planned operations? Police Commissioner answered affirmatively, while cautioning that the body cameras to be procured will not be enough based on the nature and the quantity of the planned operations. So we had expected that, given Commissioner Blake had made that commitment on September 29, that the press statement would actually reiterate and affirm that earlier commitment.
Given then that you haven't seen that position taken by the Jamaica Constabulary Force, including, as you said, reiterating what Dr. Kevin Blake, Commissioner of Police, had said, where do the body-worn cameras then put us? Do they put us in a situation, if they're not being used in planned operations, as you have highlighted, is one of the central concerns for Jamaicans for Justice? Does that then allow us to see the body-worn cameras as something that can reduce police-involved shootings? Or does it just get us to a place where we have post-incident review footage to look at?
I'm happy you asked that because I think it's important that we explain to citizens that body cameras, they're certainly not a panacea, but they are important. And we do support, for clarity, that a portion of body cameras must still go with the beat patrol officers, because if you go, for example, in downtown Kingston and you see the everyday hustle and bustle of Kingston, you'll understand and appreciate that the everyday high interaction between police and civilian, it does necessitate body cameras, because that is where a high number of the assaults happen. With that in mind, however, we're saying that it would be of great evidentiary value in planned operations where 50% of the fatalities stem from. So we will continue our advocacy and seek the clarity from the JCF to say and to ask, will a portion of those body cameras be deployed to planned operations? And when we look at trainings, have any of the officers received training who are part of the AFAT team in body camera deployment, utilization, and so on? And because we want to ensure that the cameras are utilized, then JJ then asks the question, how strong is the existing 2021 protocol? So in other words, there is a JCF protocol that governs the use of body cameras, but there are some areas that we have identified for improvement. For example, the protocol is not clear. What happens when a police officer wants to deactivate the camera?
Those are exactly the questions I was putting to you due to Michael Jackson next, because the access to the footage, or who has access and control of the footage, and what safeguards exist so the footage is preserved and not selectively disclosed, or perhaps even not turned off as they're on these operations, so that you don't get the support that you need from Indicom in the investigations. Is there anything in this framework that allows for us to know what happens now?
Yes, the protocol is actually an improved one to their 2017 version. It incorporates the Data Protection Act that speaks to privacy. But remember, it's not just privacy of those who are in contact in that particular incident. What happens, for example, if an incident is happening and you, Jody, and or myself get caught up in the middle of that? What does privacy means in a broader context? So some jurisdiction, for example, deals with issues such as that. When they talk about right of access, when it can be utilized, who has access to it, that is in our protocol, but some of the language suggests that it is discretionary rather than mandatory. So the language itself needs to be strengthened. You mentioned the activation of the cameras. It says that if an officer deactivates the camera, he may be subjected to disciplinary measures. I don't know if we're comfortable with the may, but we also don't know what those disciplinary measures are, and that is something I believe in need of strengthening. Some jurisdiction, for example, would say once a fatal shooting happens, they release it to the public widely. I'm not sure if Jamaica is there, because we have to look at our broader privacy framework, but certainly we have to ask ourselves, as you rightly said, what do we want in a Jamaican context, and do we want it just in a protocol, or do we want it to be elevated to law, given we have broader issues around CCTV cameras being utilized across the island and so on. And the Data Protection Act, though it is there, in our humble opinion, we believe that things need to be contextualized a little bit better, and specifically to body camera, CCTV footage use, given that we're using these things in national security.
Well, Michael Jackson, we're completely out of time, but it's